Hey guys, it has been way too long since I posted a video, and I'm sorry about that. I am still sneaking up here on the weekend, and this weekend I came up to do a little bit of work. I was hoping to have this motor running. Didn't quite make it there, but I have plenty of content, I think, for our video, getting the block back together and back on the leg. So without further ado, let's break into it. This is the after-work garage. Okay, so I have the main body of the motor over here, as well as some other components that I need to get assembled. But the first thing I'm going to do, since this has been sitting so long and there's dust, is I'm going to go over all of it with some two-stroke oil and just try to, clean it off. Make sure the dust and crap is out of there. Again, I didn't strip this down completely, and I didn't want to take off all the lubricant when I disassembled it, because I knew it was going to sit for a little bit. I didn't know it was going to be this long because I didn't know I was moving to Dallas. But I just want to make sure all the dust is off of surfaces, because I don't want dust rattling around in the motor, burning up, causing problems. Probably shouldn't be too big a deal, but it's always good to keep things as clean as you can get it, especially with motor building. I'm just using two-stroke oil because it is going to lubricate it, and it's what goes in here anyways, so it's not going to hurt anything. There may be better alternatives out there, but I think this is what I'm going to do for now. With the engine mostly wiped free of dust, I transferred the cork gasket from the engine block side over to the recessed groove in the crankcase cover for reinstallation. Now I probably should replace this gasket, since there's not too much gasket standing proud of the that recess, but I think it's going to seal well enough for us once we get all the bolts torqued down to spec. Put a little oil in the labyrinth seal. It's probably way too much. And then carefully lift up the rotating assembly. I'm going to try again not to pull the pistons all the way out. So these convenient recesses in here to hold this nut in place so that I can just use a screwdriver. Oops. Oh my god. Might be a little hard to get in there. There we go. Where is my magnet tool? Okay, there's a few things to note here. I got this block in place. Just got it screwed in, added the other screw here. There's a stamping here that says up on this, which tells me that this side, it should be facing up. Remember, and this sits in the motor like that. This is actually the bottom end, and that hole fits into a locating pin right down there. So we're seated in, but that's just to note that this side, for whatever reason, should be facing up. I'm going to tighten down this other screw. Make sure we're rotating freely here. And we are. That's that. That's the reed block replaced. Now we just got to put the motor back together. So I'm doing my best to get the varnish and crap off of these baiting surfaces, so we can kind of have a little bit of a clean joining surface there. But this is an old motor, and I'm not doing a complete rebuild. I'm really truly just replacing the reed valves to get it running nice again. Bearing seal there. The bearing's actually here. This is just the oil seal running around the lip there, and then this is where the drive shaft slides into place. There's some grooving on this crankshaft, but I think it'll be okay. Of course, you probably can't see any of that. O-ring that goes in here, O-ring that gets already in there. I don't think this has a particular orientation it needs, but we can always refer to the video. And then on this side, didn't really do too much over here, so I'm gonna clean this up just a touch. There's a collar on the front side here. This was rotated and askew, so I'm just gonna make sure that the open side of this collar really does face this direction, which I believe is the exhaust side. I looked back and confirmed that the open area in this plate is supposed to be facing this direction. This is on here. The rotating assembly obviously rotates freely. Our reed block assembly looks like it's in place basically properly, how it should be. Since I'm going to be torquing these bolts that I'm putting in here to a particular foot-pound, to make that easier, I made like a makeshift engine stand and just used a piece of cardboard to make a template. So what I can do is run the nuts back down onto this side, put this piece of wood in a vise or something, and it'll keep the motor stable while I torque the bolts. But first, I'm going to clean up these threads because they're pretty gunked up, and you don't want to be putting bolts in with cruddy threads because it's going to affect the torque setting. At this point, I ran down all the crankcase bolts, torqued them to the values listed in the service manual, and was getting ready to bolt down the lower crankcase seal housing when I couldn't seem to find the holes that the bolts threaded into, and after a little head scratching and not an insignificant amount of frustration, I pulled the crankcase cover back off again and found out why. So I want to point something out here. I had assumed that this bearing carrier screwed into the top of the crankcase, or the side of the crankcase like this, and I assumed it went into these holes. But actually, it goes through the holes and into this block. So if you don't have this block lined up, it's not going to go in properly. So I've got to lift this assembly up again just a little bit. So it is very important that this bearing holder, I guess this is the bearing carrier, that back there was just the retainer plate. I'll take the opportunity to clean this a little bit, is lined up with this as it goes in. Interestingly, there's a flat side on this. I'm wondering if that is supposed to go to the bottom. I'm assuming it is. Because it doesn't go to the top, it has to line up with these holes here. So these O-rings go in here. Then we put this on. Just gonna sort of get those started so they're centered, but I'm not gonna tighten it down so there's some wiggle room as I put the rest of the crankcase cover back on. Just be careful because all these bolts are the same size except for this one. And now there's one that's shorter, and it's the one that comes up here under the starter motor, just to give it clearance. All the rest are the same size. And now I can only think of Jerry Gergich from Parks and Rec saying, "It ain't government work if you don't have to do it twice." All right, I'm gonna take it off of here, get it back onto the cardboard. If you're curious, here are the torque values. Feel free to pause as necessary. We have this little fitting here. I'm gonna clean it out real quick because you can't see any light through it, so it looks like it's probably clogged. All right, here's something to point out that I've messed up. This attaches here, and this bolt actually is this bolt. So let's go ahead and undo that guy. Thing for that right now, but this is not tightened down. And these are the same. Here, I'm just installing the bolts that hold down the slider for the throttle. It's worth noting that the forward two bolts can't be tightened down too hard or the slider won't slide properly. So the reason these have these lock washers there is so that you don't have to drive them down as hard, because if you do over tighten it, this slide gets hung up and doesn't move. But as you can see, I think we're okay right now. While I have this here though, I might actually do the fuel pump and replace that. So if you remember, well, you don't remember, but a long time ago I took off this fuel pump, and I thought I was going to find a ripped membrane there, but I didn't. If we look at the side of the engine, we have the fuel pump right here, and the first thing I'm going to do is pull it apart and see which parts are damaged and which part needs to be replaced, because you can buy the whole unit, but it's rather expensive. So if we can get away with just buying the diaphragms and the gaskets and not replacing these metal parts with passages, that's going to be a lot cheaper. I think this metal thing's had it. I'll replace it with a hose clamp anyways, but let's just get it off of here. Okay, fuel hose off there. Actually, that's a water hose. That's the water hose to the Telltale. Down here we have the water supply to the fuel pump. I'm just going to cut this zip tie and pull this water hose off as well. Now we have the fuel hoses here. Oh, this is just like the other ones, it's a mess. Alright, that's undone. And the last one here, I think we'll just wait until we can, well, maybe I can get squeezed in there, squeeze something in there. There we go. And that fuel hose is off as well. I'm going to replace these. They're kind of nasty, and I think they probably just need replacing. I have the hose, why not do it? Trick is in getting them off these brittle plastic things without breaking them, so cutting it's going to definitely be our best bet, I think, there. There we go. There we go, we broke it free. Let's hope it's mostly finger tight. It is, awesome. That one could have been a battle. I will take wins when I can get them. These three bolts all look to be about the same size. Oh, and the reason there's oil here is probably because the fuel pump draws vacuum from the crankcase, And I'm assuming these bolts bolt into all the way through into the crankcase, but I don't know. All right, so here we have the back side of the fuel pump. Actually, I was expecting a tear in the diaphragm here, but maybe not. We'll still have to replace it. Maybe it's one of the valves. It's not working right. So this is the diaphragm that the vacuum is on this side, and it moves back and forth as the engine pulses and pumps fuel. Now there should be two one-way valves in here. You can see there's one-way valves. Here's one here, and there's another one here. I guess I'm going to be replacing both of those since it obviously wasn't pumping. And the diaphragm looks intact, so it must be one of these valves that isn't sealing properly. However, this is good news, given this block looks like it's in good shape. This hold down clip and everything looks like it's going to be reusable, so I think we're going to have no problem just ordering a rebuild kit instead of a whole new fuel pump. Brought the fuel pump over to the bench to work on it a little better. I just took these two screws out, and there seems to be this retaining clip here. And then we have one of the two valve assemblies, and these should be one-way valves. I think they should just come out. There we go. Just pried up on that lightly, and it has come out. Let's do the same with this one. And here's the other. Oof. Well, those gaskets are pretty gunked in there and breaking apart, so it's a good thing we're changing this. To be honest, I don't see any major tears that I might expect, but I think just replacing these is going to be our key and see if this fuel pump works again. Okay, let's talk about this fuel pump. So I have the new kit here, all the pieces, the old kit here, the old pieces here and here, and here's the old retainer plate. So the way this works is there's two check valves. One of them goes in. This is the fuel out, and this is the fuel in. And so fuel comes in through here, up through here, in here, and then gets pumped by this diaphragm, which is taking its pulses from the crankcase through this hole. And so that's pumping fuel down this way and out here. So in here, out here, these are coolant lines. But I'm going to replace these one-way valves because I think, though they seem like they still are working, you know, it's curious. These guys have little holes in them, whereas the new ones do not. And so I don't know the significance of that. Also, the new one has one plastic and one black rubber valve. So I don't know if one belongs one place and the other belongs another. So to seal these against there, we have these cork or fiber, I guess they're fiber, they're not cork, fiber gaskets that sit down in here. And then which way did we have this guy? This one was this way, this was this way. I'm going to use this old clip because this is just how they were retained, and I don't think this new retainer, I think it's supposed to go on like this, but it doesn't seem like it gives the diaphragm very much room to move, because even without that clip in there, it sits up above this level, and it's so different. I just don't think I'm going to mess with it. I think I'm going to use the old one. And then I'm going to throw a little bit of Loctite on these screws because it is subject to a lot of vibration. Alright, that is our fuel pump, at least that part of it back together. And now let's look at this diaphragm. So for our new one, it looks like they've given us 2 different gaskets here. One gasket set, which is weird because it looks like that matches up to the holes, but does not match up to what I'm seeing on the old gasket. Interesting. So this is the new diaphragm. It's much more pliable. You can see how bendy that is compared to this one. It's very stiff. I don't know if I trust whoever put this in last, because here, I don't know if you can see, but to me, so this is, as you can see, how this was like this on here. Yeah, like this on here. To me, it looks like these spaces here should be this. I feel like this gasket fits it better and lines up better with this original. You can see there's an original mark there. I don't know. I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to put this gasket on this side, and then put this gasket on this side instead of putting 2 of the same gaskets. That just doesn't look right. It just doesn't look like it was supposed to be like that. You can see the notch here in the paint. So that notch goes this way. This is. You can see it there as well. Line the sandwich up. Putting it the correct way would help. I think that's going to be okay. Got to catch a flight back home today to Dallas, and hopefully I can get a shop situation sorted out down there before too long and get videos going more regularly. But for now, I just kind of got to slot it in when I'm in Kansas City, which isn't ideal. Makes me feel bad that I'm keeping you guys waiting. I really like making videos, honestly. You know, I'm doing this for fun, so it sucks not to be able to come up here as much as I want. All right, that's the fuel pump back together. So I'm not going to get the housing back on until the block's back on the outboard, but I did buy all new diaphragms, poppet valve, thermostat to go in here. So I saw a comment the other day that was asking about the water flow and water gallery on the exhaust side. So this is the cylinder head, obviously. This is the exhaust side. So when exhaust comes up out of the cylinder, it goes down into here, into this bottom area, and then gets routed down out through the leg of the motor and into the water. Now there you can see there's this gasket here, and it's actually like 2 gaskets with a plate in between, a metal plate that's solid, so it keeps the exhaust in this side. And on the outside here is a water gallery. So this is just an open space where cooling water flows through there to cool the exhaust, keep the motor cool, and to keep the cooling water up to temperature. Now, if you run your motor through a lot of mud and dirt, what can happen is it can get up in here, and these passages on some motors especially can be really thin, and so rocks and pebbles can get stuck in there, and you'll end up with a big clog, and that's why you might not get cooling to the engine. I was going to take this off, but I'm not going to because I forgot to do it before I put all this other stuff back on, but also primarily because I don't have new gaskets and a new plate, so if I rip these or wreck them, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find new ones. I'll try. Let's get it off. Ooh, rusty. What I was trying to point out there when my compressor came on is that there's 2 short ones that are actually different lengths. Oh boy, there's 3 different lengths. Are there? Yes. This is one length. This is a short one. And all the rest are the same size. I hear gasket ripping. Not ideal. No. The answer is no, I cannot save it. Does not look bad though. See, this is the exhaust side here. Those pistons don't look bad. So this is the exhaust side. Inside here, there's a water passage, or there should be, I don't know. Yes, it's right here. It goes in this hole and circulates around here, and we'll see where and it comes out here, I believe. Alright, so here's what I've decided. I got the old gasket off of here. I can't get this open, and I'm not going to try banging too hard because I'm afraid I'm going to fracture the aluminum or damage it. I can blow lightly in here and I can feel air coming out here. So this is just hollow and I can't hear anything rattling in there, so I think it's probably good. And I'm assuming that I'm just going to leave it alone, because if I mess with it too much, I'm only going to cause problems. So I'm going to set this back on here. Now, I don't have the new gasket for this. I'm going to make an executive decision and use some gasket maker. It is a warm area of the engine, however, it's cooled by water, and if it's a problem, I don't have any paper to make a new paper gasket, otherwise I would just trace this out. You know, put a little oil and then trace it out on a piece of paper, on a paper gasket. I might have to do that in the future, but right now I don't have it. I'm going to go ahead with this so I can just get this motor back together. Alright, and it's back together. Time has almost come to get this thing back on the leg, but one last thing we have to do is to get this surface cleaned up and put this gasket back on that we tore taking it off. So I ordered a new gasket, and here it is. Let's open it up and not cut the gasket. That would be tragic. We have our gasket here, and it looks like it matches up how it should. Now we just got to get this surface cleaned up a little bit. All right. Let's see if this guy fits on here like it should. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Look at that. There we are. I'm going to repeat the cleaning process over here, but to make it easier, there's a little ground cable I'm going to disconnect. Here. Slide this off. Oh, there's two. There's another one. This is a great view, I know. The angles. Again, my main concern is the gasket mating surfaces here. Not super concerned about other things, especially the exhaust. That's just going to be messy. Just put this back on. All right, we have a block. It's back on. Let's get those nuts screwed in. Make sure it's seated, which I think it is. This is such a pain, these things. Can't even tell you. All right, so you definitely have to get all your nuts started on these studs before you tighten any of them down, because the only way to get this one on, because of the clearance here, is to lift the block up a little bit, because when it's sat all the way down, that stud comes down and you can't fit that nut in there. So if you tighten down these easy ones first, there's no way you're going to get that one. We got the power head back on the motor. Going to hook up the fuel, coolant lines, and then all we have to do is put the dressings back on, starter motor, carburetor, and the electronics, which shouldn't be too difficult. Now, putting the flywheel back on to the crankshaft, since I didn't pull this off, I saw someone ask how I'm going to orient it, and I think I'm going to be saved by this keyway right here. And I think in the previous videos, I can see that this keyway is facing a particular direction. I believe it was towards this label, but I'm going to go back and reference that when I put the flywheel back on. But unfortunately, I'm out of time. I got to head back to the airport. So this is going to get finished up in the last video, which I keep saying, but this really will be the last video because I'm just going to slap everything back on, get it running, and show it working, hopefully. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time on the After Work Garage.